The diplomatic ship Harmony's voice drifted through space toward the third planet from the yellow star. Inside the gleaming vessel, 3 alien ambassadors prepared for what they believed would be a routine first contact mission. Ambassador Zex Thalar stood 8 feet tall with skin that looked like living crystal. Blue light pulsed through translucent veins across his body as he reviewed the mission files. The humans were a young species, barely out of their home system. This should be simple. Ambassador Vorthak floated in his methane suit, a blob of orange, gel with dozens of eye stalks. His species had been exploring space for 10,000 years. These humans had only left their planet a few decades ago. They would be easy to impress and guide into the galactic community. Ambassador Quillen represented the Hive Collective. Her insect-like body clicked and chittered as she communicated with her queen across the light years. The report was clear. Humans were primitive, aggressive, and needed careful handling to prevent them from becoming a threat. All 3 ambassadors agreed on one thing. This mission would be boring. The space station appeared on their screens. New Horizon looked crude compared to galactic standard designs, metal plates welded together in basic geometric shapes, no elegant curves or artistic flourishes, just function, over form like everything else these humans built. "Incoming transmission," announced the ship's computer in the melodic tones of the crystalline hegemony. A human face appeared on the screen. Square jaw, short brown hair, and green eyes that seemed far too alert for a primitive species. He wore a blue uniform with gold stripes on the shoulders. "Welcome to New Horizon Station. I'm Captain Jake Sullivan of the Earth Defense Force. We're honored to host the first diplomatic meeting between our species." Zex Thalar leaned forward. The human spoke with confidence, not the awe they expected from a species meeting aliens for the first time. "Captain Sullivan, I am Ambassador Zex Thalar. We come in peace to establish relations between your world and the Galactic Council." "Outstanding. We've prepared quarters for your delegation and arranged a full cultural exchange program." "Fair. Warning, though, our coffee might be a bit strong for non-human digestive systems." Vorthak's eye stalks twisted in confusion. The human was making jokes. Primitive species were supposed to be terrified during first contact, not cracking wise about beverages. "We appreciate your hospitality," Quillen buzzed through her translator. "We look forward to learning about your civilization." "Same here. Doc Harper has been studying your ship's design since you arrived. Fascinating propulsion system. We think we've figured out how it works." The 3 ambassadors exchanged worried glances. The humans had been analyzing their technology. That was not supposed to happen during first contact. Primitive species lacked the scientific knowledge to understand advanced systems. "You have scientists examining our vessel?" Zex Thalar asked carefully. "Just external scans from our sensors. Nothing invasive. Dr. Lisa Harper is our chief scientist. She gets excited about new technology. I hope you don't mind her enthusiasm." Vorthak's gel body rippled with concern. A primitive species should not have sensors capable of meaningful analysis of galactic technology. Their briefing materials must have been wrong. The docking proceeded smoothly. Too smoothly. The humans guided their ship into the docking bay with precision that suggested advanced computer systems and experienced operators. This was not the fumbling effort they expected from a young spacefaring civilization. Captain Sullivan met them at the airlock with 2 other humans. A woman with black hair tied back in a neat bun wore a red uniform with lieutenant stripes. A man with graying temples wore the uniform of a commander. Ambassador Zex Thalar, Ambassador Vorthak, Ambassador Quillen. Welcome aboard New Horizon. I'm honored to make first contact with your species. This is Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, my communications officer, and Commander Rick Torres, head of tactical operations. The introductions were polite and professional. Too professional. Where was the stammering awe they expected from a primitive species meeting advanced aliens for the first time? "Would you like some coffee or tea?" "We have both," Lieutenant Rodriguez offered with a warm smile. I know interspecies dietary requirements can be tricky, but Dr. Harper analyzed the atmospheric readings from your ship and thinks our beverages should be safe for your biology. Zexathalar's crystal skin flickered with alarm. The humans had not only analyzed their ship's propulsion, but also their atmospheric composition, in less than an hour, without asking permission. That is very thoughtful, Quillen managed. Perhaps we should begin with the formal protocols. Of course, though I should mention, we've prepared a small welcome gift, Commander Torres said. Dr. Harper will present it during the ceremony. The tour of the station revealed more disturbing details. The corridors were clean and well-maintained. The crew moved with military precision. Everyone they met seemed remarkably calm about hosting alien visitors. Some even waved and said hello as if meeting extraterrestrials was completely normal. Your crew seems very comfortable with our presence, Vorthak observed, his eye stalks tracking the humans they passed. First contact training is part of basic education now, Captain Sullivan explained. We've been expecting this day for decades. Science fiction prepared us pretty well for the idea that we're not alone in the universe. Science fiction. The humans had imagined contact with aliens before it happened. They had prepared for this moment. That showed a level of forward thinking that contradicted their classification as a primitive species. The main conference room held more surprises. A large view screen showed detailed star charts of local space. The humans had mapped their entire region with impressive accuracy. Navigation computers hummed quietly in the background, processing data streams that looked suspiciously advanced. Dr. Lisa Harper entered, carrying a small device. She was a woman in her 30s with bright red hair and excited blue eyes. She practically bounced as she approached the alien delegation. Ambassadors, welcome to our little corner of the galaxy. I'm Dr. Harper, and I have something I think you'll find interesting. She activated the device. A holographic display showed a detailed schematic of the Harmony's voice. Every system was labeled, every component identified. The three ambassadors stared in growing horror as the human scientist cheerfully explained her analysis. Your quantum flux drive is brilliant. The way you channel dark matter through crystalline matrices is elegant. We think we understand the basic principles now. The power efficiency is about 30% better than our current fusion drives. Zex Thaler felt his crystal skin grow cold. The human had reverse-engineered their propulsion system from external scans alone. That should have been impossible. It had taken his people centuries to develop quantum flux technology. This is remarkable work, he said weakly. Thank you. We're fast learners. Give us a few months and we might have our own version running. Probably not as elegant as yours, but it should work. The three ambassadors looked at each other with growing alarm. These humans were not primitive. They were not simple. They were not safe, and they had just announced their intention to copy galactic technology in a matter of months. The first contact mission was not going according to plan. 6 months after Tertius Prime, Morrison found himself back on Kepler Station, but everything had changed. Where once he had been treated with curious suspicion, now aliens stepped aside when he walked down corridors, whispered conversations, stopped when he entered rooms. The title, Kill Count Instructor, was no longer just a nickname. It had become official. Morrison walked into the briefing room where Colonel Dan Hayes was waiting for him. Hayes had arrived from Earth 3 weeks ago with a team of 50 human military instructors. Jake, good to see you, Hayes said, shaking Morrison's hand. Command wants a full report on your training methods. What's there to report? I teach them how to fight. Hayes smiled. That's what's got everyone worried. We've had requests from 17 different species for human military advisors. The Alliance Council doesn't know whether to promote us or arrest us. Lieutenant Collins entered carrying a stack of data pads. Sir, the latest combat reports are in. Every unit with human trained, Personnel is showing casualty rates 60% lower than standard Alliance forces. And enemy kill rates? Morrison asked. 400% higher. Hayes whistled low. 400%? Jake, what exactly are you teaching these aliens? Morrison activated the holographic display in the center of the room. Images appeared, showing his training exercises from the past months. I teach them to think like predators instead of prey. Most Alliance species evolved as herbivores or scavengers. They fight defensively, reactively. Humans evolved as hunters. We fight to kill. The display showed Sergeant Lisa Park working with a group of Zentari snipers. She was teaching them patience, how to wait for hours for the perfect shot. Before her training, Alliance snipers took the first available shot. Now they waited for shots that would eliminate multiple targets or take out enemy commanders. Park snipers have the highest confirmed kill count in Alliance history, Morrison continued. Last week, one of her students eliminated a swarm nest commander from 2 miles away. Hayes looked impressed. What about Rogers? The display changed to show Chief Petty Officer Tony Rogers aboard an Alliance battleship. He was teaching the crew how to coordinate multiple weapon systems for devastating combined attacks. Rogers revolutionized space combat doctrine. Alliance ships used to fight like knights in jousting tournaments. One-on-one, honor duels with energy weapons. Rogers taught them wolfpack tactics, hunt in groups, attack weak points, show no mercy. Collins pulled up another set of data. The Battle of Nexus 7 was the first test of Rogers' new tactics. 12 Alliance ships destroyed 43 swarm vessels with 0 friendly losses. Hayes shook his head in amazement. 0 losses? How is that possible? Morrison switched the display to show the actual battle footage. Alliance ships moved in coordinated formations, striking at enemy vessels from multiple angles simultaneously. When swarm ships tried to retaliate, they found their targets had already moved to new positions. Rogers calls it the swarm versus the pack. The swarm relies on overwhelming numbers. We taught the Alliance to fight like wolves, coordinated, relentless, intelligent. Speaking of intelligence, Collins interrupted. We need to discuss the interrogation techniques. Hayes frowned. Interrogation techniques? Morrison looked uncomfortable. That's gotten some attention. Alliance forces traditionally don't question captured enemies. They consider it dishonorable. And now? We taught them that information saves lives. Knowing enemy plans prevents ambushes. Understanding enemy weaknesses leads to faster victories, with fewer casualties. The display showed a captured swarm creature being questioned by Alliance intelligence officers trained by humans. The interrogation was methodical, psychological rather than physical. The intelligence we've gathered has prevented 6 major swarm offensives, Collins reported. Estimated lives saved, over 2 million. Hayes nodded slowly. I'm starting to understand why the Council is nervous. We're not just teaching them better tactics. We're changing their entire philosophy of warfare. Morrison turned off the display. Dan, these species have been fighting the swarm for 50 years with minimal success. They were losing slowly but surely. Now they're winning. The question is whether they can handle what winning requires. A chime sounded, indicating an incoming message. Collins checked her comm unit. Sir, General Vorthak is requesting an immediate meeting. Priority 1. They found General Vorthak in his office, studying reports from across the galaxy. The massive alien looked tired and troubled. Colonel Hayes, Captain Morrison, thank you for coming. We have a problem. Vorthak activated a wall display showing a map of swarm-controlled territory. Red zones indicated enemy positions, but now there were new yellow zones scattered throughout. What are the yellow areas? Hayes asked. Swarm forces in retreat. For the first time in 50 years, they are abandoning established positions. Our analysts believe they are consolidating for a major counteroffensive. Morrison studied the map. Where are they consolidating? Unknown. They've gone silent. No communications, no scouting, no probing attacks. Complete radio silence for the past 2 weeks, Collins frowned. That's not normal swarm behavior. They've never shown this level of strategic thinking before. Exactly, Vorthak agreed. Which brings me to my concern. Captain Morrison, your training methods have been highly effective, but they may have forced the swarm to evolve. Morrison understood immediately. They're learning from us. Every battle your trained units fight, every tactic you teach, every innovation you introduce, the swarm observes and adapts. They are becoming more dangerous because we are becoming more dangerous. Hayes crossed his arms. General, are you suggesting we stop training your people? I am suggesting we prepare for the possibility that we have created a more intelligent enemy. The swarm's next attack will not follow their previous patterns. They will use our own innovations against us. Morrison walked to the window overlooking Kepler Station's main docking bay. Hundreds of ships were arriving and departing, carrying supplies and personnel across the galaxy. Many of those ships now carried human instructors to train Alliance forces on dozens of worlds. General, how many human trainers are currently deployed? 437 across 86 star systems. And how many Alliance personnel have received human-style combat training? Vorthak checked his datapad. Approximately 50,000, with more completing training every day. Morrison turned back to face the room. Then it's too late to stop. The swarm has already learned everything they're going to learn from watching us. The question now is whether our people can outfight an enemy that thinks like us. Collins pulled up the latest training reports. Sir, we have requests for advanced courses, psychological warfare, sabotage techniques, guerrilla tactics. They want to learn everything. Advanced courses? Hayes looked concerned. Jake, some of those techniques, I know. But Dan, this isn't about teaching them to be more human. It's about teaching them to survive. General Vorthak's comm unit buzzed with an urgent message. He read it quickly, and his expression grew grim. The swarm has broken radio silence. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. What's the message? Morrison asked. Vorthak activated the comm system. A harsh, buzzing voice filled the room, speaking in perfectly clear Alliance standard. We have learned. We have adapted. We have evolved. Your weapons, your tactics, your strategies, we understand them all. Soon we will demonstrate this understanding. The hunter has become the hunted. The message ended, leaving the room in silence. Morrison smiled grimly. Well, that's new. Hayes stared at the comm unit. Did that thing just threaten us in our own language? It did more than that, Morrison replied. It used human phrasing. The hunter has become the hunted. That's not how the Alliance thinks or speaks. Collins checked her datapad. Sir, we're receiving similar messages across all human-trained units. They're specifically targeting our people. Morrison looked at General Vorthak. General, I think it's time to authorize those advanced courses. Captain Morrison, some of those techniques you've mentioned, they violate every principle of civilized warfare. With respect, sir, the swarm just declared that civilized warfare is over. Morrison walked back to the window. In the distance, Alliance ships were forming up for patrol duties. Most of those crews had been trained by human instructors in the past 6 months. The swarm wants to fight like humans? Fine. Let's show them what humans do to enemies who threaten everything we protect. General Vorthak hesitated for a long moment, then reached for his authorization pad. Colonel Hayes, you have permission to begin advanced combat training immediately. All restrictions are lifted. Hayes nodded grimly. Understood, sir. How long? Do we have? Unknown. But based on previous swarm patterns, I estimate we have weeks, not months. Morrison turned away from the window. Then we'd better get started. It's time to show the galaxy what humans do when we stop holding back. The kill count instructor was about to earn his title all over again. 3 weeks after the incident with Kilran, Morrison received new orders. His training unit was being deployed to Tertius Prime, a mining world under attack by the Void Swarm. It would be their first real combat mission. Morrison stood in the briefing room with his 20 recruits. They looked different now than they had on that first day. Their movements were sharper, more controlled. They no longer stood in perfect lines, but spread out naturally, always watching each other's backs. General Vorthak, a massive alien with thick gray skin and tusks, addressed the assembled troops. The situation on Tertius Prime is critical. The Void Swarm has established a foothold on the northern continent. Our mission is to hold the defensive line while civilian evacuation continues. The holographic display showed the planet's surface. Red markers indicated swarm positions, while blue markers showed alliance forces. The red was slowly pushing into the blue. Standard defensive protocols will be observed, the general continued. Maintain formation integrity. Do not pursue enemy forces beyond established boundaries. Hold the line until reinforcements arrive. Morrison raised his hand. General, what's the timeline on those reinforcements? 12 days minimum. And how long can the current defensive line hold? General Vorthak hesitated. Optimistically, 8 days. Morrison looked at his unit. His recruits had learned to read his expressions over the past weeks. They knew that look meant the plan was about to change. Sir, Morrison said carefully, requesting permission to operate independently of the main defensive line. Absolutely not. Your unit lacks experience. You will be assigned to Sector 7 under Colonel Hextar's command. Yes, sir, but Morrison had no intention of sitting in a trench waiting for the swarm to overrun them. 6 hours later, Morrison's unit landed on Tertius Prime. The planet's sky was orange from dust kicked up by constant explosions. In the distance, black smoke rose from burning cities. Colonel Hextar met them at the landing zone. He was a tall, thin alien with multiple eyes that could look in different directions at once. Captain Morrison, your unit will reinforce grid. 7 Alpha, the position has been under constant pressure for 2 days. Morrison nodded. What kind of pressure? Probing attacks, small groups testing our defenses, standard swarm tactics. Morrison and his unit were transported to Grid 7 Alpha, a defensive position built around an old mining facility. The Alliance. Soldiers there looked tired and nervous. They had been fighting for weeks with little success. Lieutenant Collins studied the tactical display. Sir, this doesn't make sense. Why would the swarm send small groups against a fortified position? That's not how they operate. Morrison examined the terrain around their position. The mining facility sat in a valley surrounded by hills. There were dozens of abandoned mine shafts and equipment scattered across the landscape. Collins, remember what I taught you about reconnaissance? Always assume the enemy knows more than you do. Right. The swarm isn't probing our defenses. They're mapping them. Morrison turned to address his unit. Gear up! We're going hunting! Recruit Kilran, his arm now healed and his attitude completely changed, stepped forward. Sir, Colonel Hextar ordered us to defend this position. The Colonel ordered us to reinforce this position. The best way to reinforce a defense is to eliminate the threat. Morrison led his unit out of the defensive perimeter under cover of darkness. They moved through the abandoned mining equipment like ghosts, using every piece of cover available. 2 hours later, they found what Morrison was looking for, a swarm observation post hidden in the hills above Grid 7 Alpha. 3 insect-like creatures with multiple eyes were watching the Alliance position and transmitting data. Morrison's unit surrounded the post silently. At his signal, they struck simultaneously. The swarm creatures died before they could send a warning. But Morrison wasn't finished. He studied the data transmission equipment the creatures had been using. Collins, can you trace this signal back to its source? Collins examined the alien technology. I think so. The transmission originates from about 15 miles north. Command post, Morrison said with satisfaction. Time to send a message. Instead of returning to Grid 7 Alpha, Morrison led his unit deeper into swarm territory. They moved fast and quiet, using abandoned mine tunnels to stay hidden. They encountered 3 more swarm patrols during the night. Each time, Morrison's unit struck without warning and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. By dawn, they had reached the swarm command center. It was built inside a massive mining excavation with dozens of the insect creatures scurrying, around like ants in a hive. "Sir," whispered recruit Veltran, a small alien with excellent eyesight, "I count over 200 hostiles. We're outnumbered 10 to 1. Morrison smiled. "Good odds. Sir, in a fair fight, we'd be outnumbered. This isn't going to be a fair fight." Morrison had spent the past weeks teaching his unit about improvised explosives, using whatever materials were available. The mining facility provided plenty of raw materials. Old excavation charges, fuel tanks, even the mining equipment itself could become weapons in the right hands. Kill Ran. Take 5 people and set charges on the north wall. Veltran, you and 6 others handle the equipment yard, Collins, comm gear, and power systems. I want this place to disappear. "What about the rest of us?" asked recruit Tamora, a fierce warrior woman from a species that looked like walking tigers. "We're the distraction." Morrison's plan was simple and brutal. While most of his unit planted explosives throughout the command center, Morrison and 4 others would attack the main entrance, drawing all attention to themselves. The attack began at exactly noon. Morrison's small group opened fire on the swarm guards, then immediately retreated into the maze of mining equipment. The creatures poured out of their command center in pursuit, just as Morrison had planned. For 20 minutes, Morrison led the swarm forces on a running battle through the excavation site. His team used every trick he had taught them. They set small explosive traps, used the terrain to separate enemy groups, and struck from unexpected angles. The swarm creatures became increasingly frustrated as their prey refused to fight in the open. They had evolved to overwhelm enemies with superior numbers, but Morrison's team wouldn't stay in one place long enough to be overwhelmed. Finally, Morrison's comm unit crackled to life. "All charges set, sir. Ready to blow." Everyone out. 30 seconds. Morrison's unit scattered in all directions, abandoning the excavation site. The swarm creatures, confused by the sudden retreat, began returning to their command center. They had just reached the main entrance when the explosives detonated. The explosion was visible from Grid 7 Alpha, 15 miles away. A column of fire and smoke rose into the orange sky, and the ground shook like an earthquake. When the smoke cleared, the swarm command center was gone. So were the 200 creatures that had been inside it. Morrison's unit regrouped at a safe distance and watched the destruction. Several recruits stared at the devastation with shock. "Sir," Kilran said quietly, "in 4 hours we destroyed what the Alliance couldn't eliminate in 3 weeks. That's the difference between fighting to hold ground and fighting to win," Morrison replied. They returned to Grid 7 Alpha to find the entire Alliance force in chaos. General Vorthak himself had arrived to investigate the explosion. "Captain, Morrison report. What happened to the Swarm Command Center?" "Mission accomplished, sir. Threat eliminated." "You were ordered to defend this position." "The position is secure, sir. No more swarm attacks to worry about." General Vorthak stared at Morrison for a long moment. Around them, Alliance soldiers whispered among themselves. The impossible had happened. A single human unit had accomplished what an entire defensive army could not. "Captain Morrison, you will remain here until a full investigation is completed." "Yes, sir." But Morrison knew the investigation would reveal what everyone was beginning to suspect. Human military doctrine wasn't just different from Alliance standards. It was superior. News of the Tertius Prime operations spread through Alliance communication networks within hours. Across the galaxy, military commanders began asking the same question. If one human unit could do this much damage, what could 100? Human units accomplish? Morrison was about to find out. Jake Morrison stared at the massive alien ship hovering above Washington, D.C. The vessel was 3 miles long and completely silent. No engines roared, no lights blinked. It just floated there like a metal mountain in the sky. "Sir, they're requesting permission to land," said Lieutenant Collins from her position at the communication console. Morrison nodded. "Grant it. Let's see what they want." He had been expecting this day for months, ever since the strange signals started appearing on Earth's deep space monitoring stations. The military knew contact was coming. Morrison commanded the Special First Contact Unit, a group of soldiers and scientists trained for exactly this moment. The alien ship descended slowly and landed in the center of the National Mall. A section of the hull opened with a soft hiss, and a ramp extended to the ground. 3 figures walked down the ramp. They looked almost human, but not quite. They were taller, with longer arms and pale blue skin. Their eyes were larger than human eyes, and they had no hair. They wore simple gray uniforms with strange symbols on the chest. The leader stepped forward and spoke in perfect English. "Greetings, humans of Earth. I am Ambassador Zexthul of the Zentari Republic. We represent the Galactic Defense Alliance." Morrison stepped up to meet them. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison, United States Marine Corps. Welcome to Earth." Zexthul tilted his head slightly. "Your species has been observed for some time, Captain Morrison. We have monitored your radio signals and studied your culture. Today we offer you membership in our alliance." "What's the catch?" Morrison asked, bluntly. The alien seemed surprised by the direct question. "There is a requirement, yes. The galaxy faces a threat called the Void Swarm. They consume entire worlds and leave nothing behind. All member species contribute military forces to fight this enemy." Morrison crossed his arms. "You want our soldiers?" "Yes, but in a limited capacity. Humans would serve in support roles, supply lines, communications, medical support. Your technology is primitive compared to most Alliance species. Your weapons are crude. Your tactics are simple." Collins stepped closer to Morrison and whispered, "Sir, they're basically asking us to be space janitors." Morrison nodded but kept his expression neutral. "What do we get in return?" "Technology sharing, trade agreements, protection from hostile species, access to hundreds of worlds for colonization." Zexthul gestured toward his ship. "We offer you the stars, Captain Morrison." "I need to see what we're dealing with first," Morrison said. "Can you show me this war you're fighting?" Zexthul led Morrison and his team into the alien ship. The interior was clean and white, with soft lighting and curved walls. Everything looked smooth and perfect, like it had been grown rather than built. They entered a large room with a holographic display in the center. Zexthul touched a control panel, and images appeared in the air above them. "This is the Void Swarm," the alien said. Morrison watched as the hologram showed black ships swarming around a planet. The ships looked like insects, with multiple legs and segmented bodies. They landed on the planet's surface and began tearing apart everything they found. "They arrived in our galaxy 50 years ago," Zexthul continued. "Since then, they have consumed 47 worlds. Billions of lives lost. Our combined fleets can slow them down, but we cannot stop them." The hologram changed to show a space battle. Alliance ships fired bright energy beams at the swarm vessels. The alien ships moved in perfect formations, keeping precise distances from each other. When swarm ships got too close, the Alliance ships would retreat to maintain their formations. Morrison frowned. "Why are your ships pulling back? They had the advantage there." "Proper formation must be maintained," Zexthul explained. "It is the foundation of civilized warfare. Honor and discipline above all else." "Honor?" Morrison looked at the alien with confusion. "You're fighting for survival. Honor doesn't matter if you're dead." Zexthul's large eyes blinked slowly. "Captain Morrison, warfare has rules, protocols. We do not simply Attack randomly. That would be barbaric. Morrison turned to Collins. Show him the Civil War footage. Collins pulled out a tablet and connected it to the alien display system. The hologram changed to show images from Earth's bloodiest conflicts. Soldiers charging across open fields under heavy fire. Trenches filled with mud and bodies. Cities reduced to rubble. This was just one of our wars, Morrison explained. We've had hundreds of them. Sometimes we fight for honor. Sometimes we fight for survival. When we fight for survival, we don't worry about rules. The alien delegation watched in silence as the images continued. World War II beaches covered with landing craft. Vietnam jungles echoing with gunfire. Desert warfare in Iraq and Afghanistan. How many of your species died in these conflicts? Zexthul asked quietly. Hard to say exactly. Maybe 100 million in the last century alone. Another alien who had remained silent until now spoke up. 100 million? In 1 century? From one planet? That's just the military casualties, Collins added. Civilian deaths were much higher. Zexthul stepped back from the display. This is excessive. How does your civilization still function? Morrison shrugged. We learn. We adapt. We get better at winning. But the waste of life. Every death teaches us something, Morrison said. How to fight better next time. How to kill more efficiently. How to survive when the enemy wants to destroy everything you care about. The aliens exchanged glances. They spoke to each other in their own language for several minutes. Finally, Zexthul turned back to Morrison. Perhaps we underestimated your species. You may be more useful than we initially thought. Useful how? The Alliance has many species, but most have been at peace for centuries. We know formations and honor combat, but we lack practical experience. You could serve as cultural liaisons. Help us understand your approach to warfare. Morrison smiled, for the first time since the aliens arrived. You want me to teach your people how to fight? In an advisory capacity only, nothing that would violate Alliance protocols. Collins leaned over to Morrison again. Sir, I think they just asked you to become a drill instructor for aliens. Kepler Station was the largest structure Morrison had ever seen. The military base stretched for miles in every direction, home to over 2 million beings from dozens of different species. Ships came and went constantly, carrying supplies and troops to battles across the galaxy. Morrison walked through the main corridor with Lieutenant Collins at his side. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved past them, but most stopped to stare at the humans. Some pointed and whispered to each other in languages Morrison couldn't understand. I feel like we're in a zoo, Collins muttered. Get used to it, Morrison replied. We're the new kids here. They arrived at the training facility where Morrison would be working. The building was massive, with multiple levels and dozens of training rooms. Commander Thexivor, a tall alien with 4 arms and green scales, met them at the entrance. Captain Morrison, welcome to the Alliance Training Center. I oversee all combat instruction here. Thexivor's voice was deep and formal. Your assignment is unusual, but orders from High Command are clear. You will assist with training new recruits. What kind of training? Morrison asked. Basic combat formations, weapon handling, military protocol, standard curriculum that has been used for 300 years. Thexivor handed Morrison a data pad. Your class consists of 20 recruits from 5 different species. Most instructors here are veterans with decades of experience. Do not expect immediate respect. Morrison looked at the list of names on the pad. Most were unpronounceable combinations of letters and symbols. When do I meet them? Now. Thexivor led them to a large training room. 20 young aliens stood in perfect lines, their backs straight and eyes forward. They wore identical gray uniforms and held energy rifles that glowed with soft blue light. Morrison studied his new students. Most looked like different versions of humans, 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. But the details were all wrong. Some had blue skin, others had scales or fur. A few had extra eyes or unusual mouth shapes. One student was nearly 8 feet tall, while another barely reached Morrison's waist. "Recruits, attention," HFY called out. "This is Captain Morrison from the recently contacted species called humans. He will be assisting with your training." A tall alien with blue skin and silver markings raised his hand. "Sir, what combat experience does this human have? His species only recently achieved space travel." HFY looked uncomfortable. "Recruit Kilran, you will address all questions to Captain Morrison directly." Morrison stepped forward. "What's your name, soldier?" "Kilran of the Zentari Republic, sir. I have studied at the Academy for 4 years. My family has served the Alliantians." "When do we start?" he asked. 3 days later, Morrison found himself aboard an Alliance transport ship heading for Kepler Station, the military headquarters of the Galactic Defense Alliance. The ship was fast and comfortable, but Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into something much bigger than anyone realized. Earth had just agreed to send its soldiers to fight in an alien war, but Morrison suspected that before long it wouldn't be an alien war anymore. It would become something else entirely, something human. Jake Morrison stared at the massive alien ship hovering above Washington, D.C. The vessel was 3 miles long and completely silent. No engines roared, no lights blinked. It just floated there like a metal mountain in the sky. "Sir, they're requesting permission to land," said Lieutenant Collins from her position at the communication console. Morrison nodded. "Granted. Let's see what they want." He had been expecting this day for months, ever since the strange signals started appearing on Earth's deep space monitoring stations. The military knew contact was coming. Morrison commanded the Special First Contact Unit, a group of soldiers and scientists trained for exactly this moment. The alien ship descended slowly and landed in the center of the National Mall. A section of the hull opened with a soft hiss, and a ramp extended to the ground. 3 figures walked down the ramp. They looked almost human, but not quite. They were taller, with longer arms and pale blue skin. Their eyes were larger than human eyes, and they had no hair. They wore simple gray uniforms with strange symbols on the chest. The leader stepped forward and spoke in perfect English. "Greetings, humans of Earth. I am Ambassador Zex Thul of the Zentari Republic. We represent the Galactic Defense Alliance." Morrison stepped up to meet them. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison, United States Marine Corps. Welcome to Earth." Zexathul tilted his head slightly. "Your species has been observed for some time, Captain Morrison. We have monitored your radio signals and studied your culture. Today, we offer you membership in our alliance." "What's the catch?" Morrison asked. Bluntly, the alien seemed surprised by the direct question. "There is a requirement, yes. The galaxy faces a threat called the Void Swarm. They consume entire worlds and leave nothing behind. All member species contribute military forces to fight this enemy." Morrison crossed his arms. "You want our soldiers?" "Yes, but in a limited capacity. Humans would serve in support roles, supply lines, communications, medical support. Your technology is primitive compared to most Alliance species. Your weapons are crude. Your tactics are simple." Collins stepped closer to Morrison and whispered, "Sir, they're basically asking us to be space janitors." Morrison nodded but kept his expression neutral. "What do we get in return?" "Technology sharing, trade agreements, protection from hostile species, access to hundreds of worlds for colonization." Zexthul gestured toward his ship. "We offer you the stars, Captain Morrison." "I need to see what we're dealing with first," Morrison said. "Can you show me this war you're fighting?" Zexthul led Morrison and his team into the alien ship. The interior was clean and white, with soft lighting and curved walls. Everything looked smooth and perfect, like it had been grown rather than built. They entered a large room with a holographic display in the center. Zexthul touched a control panel, and images appeared in the air above them. "This is the Void Swarm," the alien said. Morrison watched as the hologram showed black ships swarming around a planet. The ships looked like insects, with multiple legs and segmented bodies. They landed on the planet's surface and began tearing apart everything they found. "They arrived in our galaxy 50 years ago," Zexthul continued. "Since then, they have consumed 47 worlds, billions of lives lost. Our combined fleets can slow them down, but we cannot stop them." The hologram changed to show a space battle. Alliance ships fired bright energy beams at the swarm vessels. The alien ships moved in perfect formations, keeping precise distances from each other. When swarm ships got too close, the Alliance ships would retreat to maintain their formations. Morrison frowned. "Why are your ships pulling back? They had the advantage there." "Proper formation must be maintained," Zexthul explained. "It is the foundation of civilized warfare, honor and discipline above all else." "Honor?" Morrison looked at the alien with confusion. "You're fighting for survival. Honor doesn't matter if you're dead." Zexthul's large eyes blinked slowly. "Captain Morrison, warfare has rules, protocols. We do not simply attack randomly. That would be barbaric." Morrison turned to Collins. "Show him the Civil War footage." Collins pulled out a tablet and connected it to the alien display system. The hologram changed to show images from Earth's bloodiest conflicts. Soldiers charging across open fields under heavy fire, trenches filled with mud and bodies, cities reduced to rubble. "This was just one of our wars," Morrison explained. "We've had hundreds of them. Sometimes we fight for honor. Sometimes we fight for survival. When we fight for survival, we don't worry about rules." The alien delegation watched in silence as the images continued. World War II beaches covered with landing craft, Vietnam jungles echoing with gunfire, desert warfare in Iraq and Afghanistan. "How many of your species died in these conflicts?" Zexthul asked quietly. "Hard to say exactly. Maybe 100 million in the last century alone." Another alien who had remained silent until now spoke up. 100 million? In 1 century? From 1 planet? "That's just the military casualties," Collins added. "Civilian deaths were much higher." Zexthul stepped back from the display. "This is excessive. How does your civilization still function?" Morrison shrugged. "We learn, we adapt, we get better at winning, but the waste of life, every death, teaches us something," Morrison said. "How to fight better next time, how to kill more efficiently, how to survive when the enemy wants to destroy everything you care about." The aliens exchanged glances. They spoke to each other in their own language for several minutes. Finally, Zexthul turned back to Morrison. "Perhaps we underestimated your species. You may be more useful than we initially thought." "Useful how?" "The Alliance has many species, but most have been at peace for centuries. We know formations and honor combat, but we lack practical experience. You could serve as cultural liaisons, help us understand your approach to warfare." Morrison smiled, for the first time since the aliens arrived. "You want me to teach your people how to fight?" "In an advisory capacity only. Nothing that would violate Alliance protocols." Collins leaned over to Morrison again. "Sir, I think they just asked you to become a drill instructor for aliens." Morrison looked at the holographic display, which still showed images of human warfare. Then he looked at the aliens, with their perfect uniforms and shocked expressions. "When do we start?" he asked. 3 days later, Morrison found himself aboard an Alliance transport ship heading for Kepler Station, the military headquarters of the Galactic Defense Alliance. The ship was fast and comfortable, but Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into something much bigger than anyone realized. Earth had just agreed to send its soldiers to fight in an alien war. But Morrison suspected that before. Long, it wouldn't be an alien war anymore. It would become something else entirely, something human. The sky over Ridgewood had always been a comforting shade of blue, dotted with fluffy white clouds that drifted lazily across the horizon. But today was different. Today the sky burned with an unnatural crimson glow, as if the heavens themselves were on fire. People stepped out of their homes, shielding their eyes from the strange light, unsure of what they were witnessing. Some whispered prayers, others snapped photos with their phones, but everyone felt the same thing, a mix of awe and dread. In the center of town, Ryan Carter leaned against the hood of his old pickup truck, wiping grease-stained hands on a rag. He was a tall man in his early 30s, with scruffy brown hair and a face lined by years of hard work. His wife, Laura, stood beside him, clutching her notebook tightly. She was a petite woman with sharp green eyes and a habit of biting her lip when she was nervous. Right now, her lips were raw. "What do you think it is?" Laura asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan squinted at the sky. "Could be anything. Meteor shower, aurora, or maybe—" He trailed off, not wanting to say the word aloud. Aliens. It sounded ridiculous, even in his head. But deep down, he knew something big was coming. A low rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. The sound grew louder, deeper, until it felt like the entire world was vibrating. Then came the shadow, a massive shape blotting out the sun. The townsfolk gasped as a ship descended slowly, its jagged edges glinting menacingly in the red light. It wasn't sleek or shiny like the spaceships in movies. This thing looked alive, pulsating faintly as though it were breathing. Ryan's heart pounded in his chest. He had seen enough disaster flicks to know how this usually ended. Aliens showed up, humans got wiped out, and credits rolled. But standing there, watching the monstrous vessel touch down in the middle of the town square, he didn't feel fear. Not yet. Instead, he felt anger. Pure, unfiltered rage bubbled up inside him. Who were these invaders to barge into their lives, uninvited and unwelcome? Beside him, Laura flipped open her notebook and started writing furiously. She always wrote when she was overwhelmed, capturing every detail so she wouldn't forget. Her pen scratched across the page as she jotted down descriptions of the ship. The reactions of the crowd, the way the air seemed charged with electricity. For a moment, Ryan forgot about the alien invasion and smiled. That was Laura, always observing, always documenting. The ship settled onto the cracked asphalt with a deafening thud. A section of its surface split open, revealing a dark opening. Everyone held their breath as figures emerged. They weren't human. Towering at least 8 feet tall, they moved with jerky, insect-like motions. Their bodies were covered in chitinous armor, and their glowing eyes scanned the crowd with cold indifference. When one of them spoke, its voice was guttural, distorted, as though it were struggling to form words. "We are the Harrow," it said, each syllable heavy with menace. "Your world, ours now." A collective shiver ran through the crowd. Mothers clutched their children closer. Men clenched their fists. No one spoke. No one dared to move. Ryan glanced around, taking in the faces of his neighbors. Mr. and Mrs. Dawson, the elderly couple who ran the bakery, looked pale and terrified. Young Billy Harper, who delivered newspapers every morning, had tears streaming down his cheeks. Even Sheriff Daniels, usually so calm and authoritative, seemed frozen in place. Laura stopped writing and looked up at Ryan. "What do we do?" He hesitated. What could they do? These creatures were clearly more advanced than anything humanity had ever faced. Fighting back would be suicide. Running might buy them some time, but where could they go? The Harrow had already claimed their planet. Before Ryan could answer, the aliens began moving. They fanned out in perfect formation, scanning buildings and dragging people out of their hiding spots. One of them approached a young woman, who had collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Without hesitation, it raised a clawed hand and swiped at her. The crowd screamed as she crumpled to the ground, motionless. That was when Ryan snapped. Something inside him broke. Maybe it was seeing an innocent person killed right in front of him. Maybe it was the realization that doing nothing meant accepting defeat. Whatever it was, he couldn't stand there anymore. "Enough!" he shouted, stepping forward. His voice cut through the chaos like a knife. All eyes turned to him, including the glowing ones of the nearest Harrow soldier. For a brief second, Ryan thought he'd made a terrible mistake. The alien tilted its head, studying him with those eerie eyes. Then it raised a weapon, a long, metallic tube, and aimed it directly at him. Ryan braced himself, expecting pain or death or something worse. But instead, the creature paused, almost as if it were curious. Laura grabbed his arm, trying to pull him back. "Ryan, stop!" But Ryan didn't listen. "You want our world?" he demanded, his voice shaking with fury. "Fine, take it, but you're going to regret it." The alien didn't respond. It just stared at him for a moment longer before lowering its weapon and turning away. Ryan let out a shaky breath, surprised he was still alive. Around him, the crowd murmured nervously, unsure of what had just happened. When the Harrow finally left, retreating back into their ship and disappearing into the sky, the town erupted into chaos. Some people cried, others argued, and a few tried to piece together what had just occurred. Ryan and Laura stayed silent, watching the crimson glow fade from the sky. Later that night, they sat together on the porch of their small house, listening to the distant hum of alien activity. The streets were eerily quiet, abandoned except for the occasional patrol of Harrow drones. Laura flipped through her notebook, reading over her notes. "They're not invincible," she said suddenly, breaking the silence. Ryan raised an eyebrow. "What makes you say that?" She tapped her pen against the page. "Think about it. They hesitated with you. If they were truly unstoppable, they would have killed you without thinking twice." Ryan frowned. "Or maybe they were just messing with me." "No," Laura insisted. "There's something else going on here. We just need to figure out what it is." Ryan sighed and leaned back in his chair. He wanted to believe her, but hope felt like a luxury he couldn't afford right now. Still, he couldn't deny the spark of determination in her eyes. Laura had always been the thinker, the planner. If anyone could find a way to fight back, it was her. As the hours ticked by, the reality of their situation sank in. The Harrow weren't leaving anytime soon. This wasn't a movie where heroes swooped in to save the day. This was real life, and they were on their own. But as Ryan looked at Laura, scribbling furiously in her notebook, he felt a flicker of resolve. Maybe they couldn't win. Maybe they couldn't even survive. But one thing was certain. They wouldn't go down without a fight. And that, Ryan realized, was exactly what the Harrow had underestimated. Humanity wasn't just about strength or technology. It was about stubbornness, resilience, and the refusal to give up even when all hope seemed lost. Finally, a reason to get really nasty.